And so I think that there's like this fundamental breakdown of just our money. That's how we got here. It was a slow breakdown that has accelerated in the last several decades because we had one big crisis after another where we had to kick the can down the road and again kind of paper over it. We had a stock bubble in the 90s. We papered over it and kicked the can to the housing market. And from the housing market, we kicked the can up to the sovereign level. And now here we are. We're at the sovereign debt level and you can't kick it anywhere from here. So the release valve is going to be the dollar and it's going to be bondholders. And that's a very scary place to be, especially for young people who are trying to create a life for themselves and a future. And so they need to acquire hard assets. And the easiest one and the best one to acquire is Bitcoin.
Natalie Brunell is the host of the Natalie Brunell Show on YouTube. She also has her own podcast where she interviews the top experts on FinTwit as well as the crypto sphere. Natalie, thank you so much for coming on Capital Cosm.
Oh, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
So for people who may not know who you are, Natalie, who are you? Kind of give us a rundown on your investment journey. What got you into the investment game? What got you into podcasting, et cetera?
Sure. Well, this was a very unexpected journey. I'm a Bitcoin educator and I host a podcast, and it's really focused on helping people with financial literacy. You know, so many of us, no matter what we study, I think everyone needs a fundamental understanding of money and how to best, protect the value of what you earn for the future. And that's really not something that we're taught in schools. I think even people with sophisticated business degrees don't really fully understand money or economic theories. And so that's really what Bitcoin taught me. And I'm so grateful because my career background is actually media. It's mainstream journalism. So I was an investigative reporter and journalist for many, many years. And I stumbled upon Bitcoin, not through work actually, but because I had friends who were investing in it. And I just got very curious. Part of that was, I think, just driven by the fact that as a millennial, I felt like I was treading water. Like I never earned enough to kind of get to that next level, to accumulate an asset like real estate, like a house. And I wondered why was it so easy for previous generations to do this, making less money than I'm making now? And so I had sort of these seeds planted and these questions in my mind. Also, my parents were the victims of the great financial crisis. They lost their home. And so I wondered, why is the system like this in the land of opportunity? You know, the American dream is why my parents came here, and it was so hard to achieve, even though I got a master's degree and I was, working in network television. And it wasn't until I learned about Bitcoin that I really peeled back the layers on how our financial system works, how does banking work, where our money comes from, who controls it, and all the problems I believe will be solved by Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, let's just dive right in, Natalie. What is kind of like your, 80,000 foot view of the economy at the moment? Like kind of broad strokes. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think it's an economy that works for some, for the very wealthy, at the expense of everyone else. We've created a system that really socializes losses and privatizes gains. And so we have this growing wealth concentration that's very frustrating, and understandably, right? I mean, I don't think it's surprising that we see an increase in populism and people then turning to politics for solutions because they're frustrated. People are not keeping up with the cost of assets inflating, the cost of real estate, the cost of, I mean, even things like healthcare, education is running away from them, and they never make enough. And we have to start digging into, why is that? Why are wages not keeping up? And I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding about inflation. We all sort of accept the fact that things get more expensive, but no one's getting the type of raise that they need in order to keep up with it. And so it's really the people who hold assets, who hold hard, scarce assets, who benefit. And that isn't the entire population. That's not the entire middle class. We barely have a middle class now. It's really the few who are benefiting from all of the money printing and asset inflation that's been occurring. And so we need a solution. And I don't think that solution is going to come from left or right, just battling out, fighting over what kind of government intervention is needed. I think we actually need to decouple money from the state and the power, the monopoly that the state has over controlling money, the fact that we have fallible, imperfect humans controlling the price of money, and we need to return it to the market. We need something that emerges from the market, like gold did, thousands of years ago, and resets things, rebalances things so that we have true capitalism emerge again. We don't have capitalism right now. We have a system that is driven by special interests and people who are close to the money printer. And that again is at the expense of so many hardworking people. So I really think that we need a paradigm shift in our economic structure and how we interact with one another economically, globally. And I think Bitcoin will serve as that global universal currency that we can really trust when, none of us really trust each other, much less the state or the media anymore.
Why do you think we got to where we are now? Was there like a singular event, or was it just a slow decay of degradation of everything? How did we get here, Natalie? I mean, you just mentioned your parents came from, what was it, Poland or
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
So it came from Poland, many, many, many years ago. The country was vastly different than it is
Hmm.
today. What's happened? Why are we in this state of degradation?
Hmm. I mean, so much has happened and nothing happens overnight. It has been a slow, I guess, decay. I liked that word that you used because it has really been a decay. This entropy always sets in. And I think really what happened is the money became more and more broken. And when a small group of people can control and manipulate the monetary supply and interest rates, it leads to distortions across the economy that will benefit some people and it will disenfranchise others. I think that at the end of the day, it's not, any one person or organization's fault. It's really partially due to technology. Lynn Alden brilliantly kind of analyzes this and categorizes what happened from the history of money when we went from the gold standard to papering over it with fiat to sort of where we are today with a very fragmented, unstable system. And it's understandable because gold is sort of the best money we had before Bitcoin. It is hard. It is fungible. It is divisible. It is kind of portable to an extent in coins, but it got to a point where we centralized it. It's not that easy to transport globally or verify. And so most of it got centralized in the reserves of central banks, and we papered over it. And banks at some point realized that, well, you know what? Not everyone's coming to claim their big gold bars or all their gold coins. So we can issue more paper than we actually have in reserves. We started fractional reserve banking. And I think that's where really a lot of the problems started because we essentially created a system where you're borrowing more than you're actually taking in. And that is the story of our government today, right? I mean, $34 trillion in debt that we can never pay back at this point, but we just keep kind of papering over it. And then we kick the can up to that government level, right? The banks wanted a backstop and a lender of last resort. We created the Fed over 100 years ago. And in that 100 years, the dollar has lost 90% of its purchasing power. And why is that? Because every time that there's a crisis, they step in to paper over it and they increase the monetary supply. They dilute everyone's savings, and no one has a say or a vote in this. And so inflation is just baked into the cake at this point. They increase the monetary supply every single year. They tell you the CPI is just 2%. Oh, you're not really noticing it in your bag of chips, even though why is my bag of chips like half full compared to what it was? And the ingredients are totally changing. And meanwhile, the wealthy people who own a bunch of stocks or real estate, they are benefiting tremendously from money moving into these asset classes. And so I think that there's like this fundamental breakdown of just our money. That's how we got here. It was a slow breakdown that has accelerated in the last several decades because we had one big crisis after another where we had to kick the can down the road and again kind of paper over it. We had a stock bubble in the 90s. We papered over it and kicked the can to the housing market. And from the housing market, we kicked the can up to the sovereign level. And now here we are. We're at the sovereign debt level and you can't kick it anywhere from here. So the release valve is going to be the dollar and it's going to be bondholders. And that's a very scary place to be, especially for young people who are trying to create a life for themselves and a future. And so they need to acquire hard assets. And the easiest one and the best one to acquire is Bitcoin. You can't buy a fraction of a house. It's not easy sometimes to, start investing in these crazy stocks that have run away from actual fundamental value of the company. But Bitcoin is accessible to 8 billion people around the world, and it's the best form of property that you can buy right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned gold. So let's just dive right into it again, Natalie. How does Bitcoin differentiate itself from gold? And can gold and Bitcoin coexist in the same world? What do you think?
Well, I think it's coexisting right now. And I think a lot of people who are fervent gold bugs are realizing that Bitcoin just improves upon gold. Um, Gold is great in the sense that it has a low inflation rate, about 1.5 to 2% a year. It's hard money. You can't destroy it it has all these wonderful properties that make a good hard money. But try sending a bar of gold from here to Italy or to China in a matter of a few seconds. I mean, you can't do it, right? And you'll need to bring in third parties. You're going to need counterparties. You're going to need to pay people to help you move it from one location to the next. That process will be slow. People will take a cut along the way. Settlement is not something that can happen quickly with gold. And that was its greatest defect or reason why it was papered over, because it's really difficult to take physical gold and transport it. So Bitcoin improves upon that because it offers instant settlement with no counterparties. It enables peer-to-peer global instant settlement, moving value across the internet at really the speed of light. And so that is something that is revolutionary, especially because we live in a digital world and a digital economy. And so we can't be, sending gold on slow ships or massive planes. We need something that is equipped for the internet world, and we need a native currency for the internet, and that is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, so in the Bitcoin sphere, you have the halving, which essentially means every 4 years it requires twice as much energy to mine the same unit of Bitcoin than it did the previous 4 years. Now we're currently in this halving cycle, or just past this halving cycle. And typically what you see is a leg up in Bitcoin and in the rest of the crypto complex. Has this kind of been playing out the way a lot of crypto analysts have foreseen it? Bitcoin is just around 60,000 at the moment, made all-time highs a couple of months back, but it's kind of corrected for a bit. Is it simply the fact that for the first time in Bitcoin's life that you have interest rates as high as they are? Do interest rates, can Bitcoin thrive in a 550 basis points interest rate environment?
Well, I would say that it is. Prior to this, you're right. I mean, Bitcoin was it was birthed into an era of QE and really only knew a quantitative easing low interest rate environment. And here we are a year ago, Bitcoin was $30,000. Now we're in the $60,000 range. We've doubled in price at these high interest rates. And yes, we've had a halving. We had a huge run up prior to the halving, which is what's happened historically. And now we're sort of consolidating. We're volatile, sort of chopping sideways. And then typically about a year and a half after the halving is when we see a significant move to the upside. Now, this can all change, right? Because markets are fluid and very dynamic and complex. This is a global asset again. And we have a lot of macro factors that point to deceleration in economies around the world. Again, interest rates remaining high. So this isn't something that most assets have encountered in a very long time, much less something as small and new as Bitcoin. But I think it's faring extremely well. It now has been legitimized by everywhere from Wall Street to Washington, D.C. to presidential candidates. I'm curious if we're going to hear it being talked about in the election that's coming up between Biden and Trump. So Bitcoin has come a long way in 15 years, and I think it's only going to grow from here. Institutions are starting to come in, and that all takes time, right? Because it's easy for a retail investor to just turn to maybe their wife or husband and say, you know what, maybe we should invest in Bitcoin, and they might talk it over for a week or two. But a massive institution that has billions of dollars under management, they're going to take a little bit more time because they have a fiduciary responsibility to the people who are invested in that company. So they're going to be a little bit slower, but once they come in, that is significant because the amount of money that they can purchase Bitcoin with significantly moves the market. And I think that we're only going to see significant upside, especially if you zoom out and think about this as like that 5-10 year savings technology.
Yeah. So you mentioned the institutional adoption coming into the Bitcoin and crypto space at large. You have the likes of BlackRock, for example, opening the Bitcoin ETF. Some people may not trust BlackRock, though. Is the likes of BlackRock and all these other all these other institutional organizations really a good thing? Some might say that this is kind of how they've kind of been able to pin down gold from or silver from really going ballistic, for lack of a better term. What do you think? What do you say to those people?
I view everything as good for Bitcoin. It's for your friend. It's also for your enemy. The fact that these ETFs were approved, it brought, I mean, literally billions of dollars of capital flowing into this asset class. And so even if you hate BlackRock, you benefited from the price appreciation that occurred because other people wanted to purchase it. And there are institutions that literally cannot purchase spot Bitcoin. They need one of these security vehicles in order to be able to invest in this asset class. And so, why not? I think people need to be able to make choices based on their own preferences and desires and the forecast they make for their financial futures. And all of that is accretive. That's the one thing that I've realized about Bitcoin is, you now have an asset that is truly global, where a company in Hong Kong or a company in Germany, if they adopt a Bitcoin standard, you'll have nothing to do with that company. Maybe you'll never purchase their product or service. Maybe you'll never even hear from them. But if they adopt the Bitcoin standard, you sitting wherever you are in the US or anywhere in the world will benefit from it. I mean, that's amazing, right? I mean, if I purchase a home in Miami, well, a kid in Korea is not affected by that, right? Or if I purchase Apple share, but Bitcoin, when anyone buys it in any vehicle that they buy it, it adds to the entire network and the strength of it. And I think that that's incredible because we really don't see assets that perform this way.
Yeah. So the store of value aspect of Bitcoin, you can take it across state lines, country lines. You put it in a thumbnail, go across, go across the world. You'd be much hard pressed to do the same with gold and silver, especially silver. Silver is you have to carry a lot of silver for that. So how do you look at the volatility of Bitcoin when you have these rapid swings up and down? Is it simply a function of Bitcoin's age, i.e., it's about 13, 14 years old? Over time, as Bitcoin gets older, you have more and more adoption. You should see a lessening of the volatility moving forward. Is that the way you kind of see it as well?
Yeah, I mean, I see volatility as something that I'm prepared to handle because I've done my homework and I see this as a long-term strategy. So I'm not worried about it. Even people who are believers in real estate as a great store of value, you're not necessarily checking the price of your home every day. And that's a very illiquid asset that's not going to be very easy to sell. Bitcoin is very new, it's young, it's small, it's very liquid, it trades 24/7. There are a lot of traders who, use arbitrage opportunities to move the needle. And so, yes, it's going to be volatile. It's not something that if you want to make a huge purchase that you should invest in with a very short time horizon, and you shouldn't take on leverage. I mean, people can get really washed out when it makes these upwards or downwards movements. So it's something that you should look at for the long term, again, as a savings technology, because the one thing that is certain is the fiat currencies are going to continue to be debased, and some of them at a faster rate than others, but that is a guarantee. They will have to continue to dilute the supply, add to it, manipulate the markets. And so one of the only places that you can put Bitcoin, or one of the only places you can put your money that is immune to manipulation and corruption, is Bitcoin, which is truly amazing. And so that's why I think more and more people will start to wake up to the fact that they have to protect their money and they have to move it into a network that isn't so easily swayed by political actors. It's so easy to politicize money today. That's one of the fundamental problems that we discussed earlier. Money shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be controlled by one party or another or a small group of people that you will never meet. It should be controlled by the market and by us just deciding and acting through our free will to decide what is a good product or service to buy and which one's cheap. There should be, this robust competition on the base layer so that we get the most valuable, best priced items ever. I mean, we look at deflation as a bad thing, and it's actually a great thing. I mean, who wouldn't want things to get cheaper while their money appreciates? I mean, that would be,
Asset
I
owners.
would love that situation, right? And we accept deflation pretty much only in technology, and we don't accept it anywhere else. And I think that's because we don't have good money, and we won't until we adopt Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, any other cryptos that you're as bullish on as you are Bitcoin, or are you a bit what you would call a Bitcoin maximalist?
Yeah, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I only invest in Bitcoin. Again, I believe that people should choose what's right for their portfolios. I see the other crypto tokens more as digital equities and technologies that I just are far too risky for me. I know that a lot of people maybe who don't understand Bitcoin see Bitcoin as risky. I actually think it's the safest bet. Crypto is too risky for me. It involves too many situations where a small group of people can control, influence, or change a protocol, and not enough information is really presented. That's why there are so many questions about unregistered securities. The protocols. I mean, this is a space that preaches transparency, and yet sometimes you have no idea what the roadmap and framework is for any of these tokens, and you have a small group of people who benefit, who issued it. And so I don't want to invest in a token where some person could potentially get arrested someday and all of a sudden the value could tank to zero. Bitcoin is truly decentralized. It is the only one that I trust. It's the only one that I think can serve as global money. And we need on a global level to reorient ourselves in a way that is more economically fair. I just don't think our system at the base layer is fair. And I think that, again, we need something that emerges from a grassroots sort of money emerging from the market as opposed to being top down imposed on us by people in power.
Well, that's the system as a whole right now. I mean, we're sitting here waiting to hear Fed Powell's next
Yeah.
move, seeing when the next rate cutting cycle starts. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no free market deciding interest rates. So you mentioned the adoption of Bitcoin to the institutions earlier in the interview. So in 2017, we had a wider adoption from the retail side. That's the two bull cycles ago
Yeah.
for Bitcoin. In 2020, the big leg up, or 2021, you started seeing institutional adoption it's becoming manifest now. Now, what is the next level of adoption? Is it on the sovereign level, do you think? And is El Salvador, for example, is that kind of like the prototype for other countries, or is that simply just like kind of like a precursor of what Bitcoin's potential could be?
Well, I actually think that the next wave is bigger, kind of brand name, iconic institutions.
Mm.
I think we've started that, and we have seen some big names in public companies, but not to the extent that we will, because there are so many massive companies that have billions of dollars on their balance sheets, and it's cash essentially melting away. And I think that a lot of them will turn to Bitcoin. I think pension funds. I think the sort of the TradFi world will start to place a portion of their investment in their portfolios into Bitcoin. It might be small, but small will still be significant with the amount of money that these companies have and earn. And then I think after that, we'll see more nation states. It's really interesting. I just did a story on my news block about how the German government sees like 50,000 Bitcoin from a movie piracy site, and they plan to sell it all. It's like they became the fourth largest nation state holder of Bitcoin, and they're already ready to send it to exchanges and let go of it. And the other day, I think the United States sent like $220 million of Bitcoin to a Coinbase wallet. It's just so funny because they also, I mean, nation states have the power power to buy so much Bitcoin. I mean, they could literally print money to buy Bitcoin, and instead they're preparing to sell it, which is very it's counterintuitive, but at the same time, it's great for us Bitcoiners because again, we want to remove the power from the state and return it to the people. So it's interesting the dynamic and the game theory that I think will play out because I do believe that 20 years from now, all the big nation states, the G7, they will all have Bitcoin, and it will be actually strategic. It will be strategic from a military standpoint. It'll be strategic from a cybersecurity standpoint. It'll be strategic from an economic strength standpoint. But we're a ways away. And I think the companies, the individuals, and then the companies, and then the nation states will sort of be the order.
What about the level of energy consumption with Bitcoin mining? How do you guys justify the intense amount of energy required to mine Bitcoin? Is the payoff worth it? I'm sure. Can you kind of explain why you think it's worth it?
Yeah, so I mean, so many directions that we could take this question. First of all, the amount of energy used is overstated by many media outlets that paint Bitcoin as being this like ridiculous consumer of energy to the point that it's going to harm our existence on Earth. That's not true. I mean, Bitcoin uses less than 1/10 of 1% of all energy. Most industries that people take for granted, like tourism and fashion and transportation. I mean, these are industries that use much, much more energy. I think the question is emissions. What kind of energy is being used? And Bitcoin mining, there are so many reports out there that about 50%, sometimes more, is actually renewable and sustainable because Bitcoin miners, they're location agnostic and they're seeking out the cheapest energy. So they're prepared to go to the fringe and very remote places to seek out literally sometimes negatively priced energy so that they can mine. So it's been really inspiring to see things pop up like Bitcoin miners moving into areas where there's hydropower in remote areas in Africa where they can set up and then create a point of infrastructure stability so that communities can form there and create other jobs and productive operations. That's something that hasn't happened and wasn't possible before Bitcoin. Thermal energy in El Salvador, the renewable energy plants in places like Texas, where the sun shines only half of the day, the wind doesn't constantly blow, and there's this mismatch between supply and demand. And Bitcoin miners come in and stabilize that because they always need energy and they can turn off at the drop of a hat. And so they're actually making solar and wind farms economically viable without a bunch of tax subsidies that essentially are taking money from taxpayers to pay these private companies. So it's actually amazing how it's actually regulating energy needs and consumption around the world and providing more opportunity to build out so that more communities have access to power. A lot of them are using stranded or wasted energy. I learned a fascinating fact that I didn't know before Bitcoin, which is that the problem with energy is really transportation, getting it to the place where it's needed. And so a lot of energy is wasted. It's stranded and wasted. Sometimes it's flared in a very potent, toxic way in our environment, including methane. And again, Bitcoin miners can step in, you can hook up a generator, and all of a sudden that energy is channeled into the Bitcoin mining as opposed to being released into our atmosphere. And so again, that's incredible. So something using energy is not bad. I care about pollution in our environment. And what I've seen is Bitcoin actually fixing a lot of the things that would normally pollute or waste energy or be something that excludes people from being able to electrify communities and build infrastructure. So I'm actually really bullish on all of it. And I think we're going to need more energy in the future, and Bitcoin will help supply that for people.
Yeah, there's a lot of wasted energy out there, and yeah, better to use them than to let it go to waste, right?
Yep.
So
Let it get flared in our atmosphere. Right.
yeah, definitely makes sense. All right, so let's go ahead and move away from Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and talk about something that's a little closer to what you do on your channel, which is interview experts. So you've been interviewing experts for what, 3-4 years now. What have you gotten? What are some of the big takeaways from meeting these minds in the crypto space, in the FinTwit space, across the entire gambit?
I mean, so many lessons. I've been so fortunate because I've met people from lots of different backgrounds and industries and levels of expertise who have all come to the same conclusion. And it's a conclusion that we need to share with the world. It's that everyone recognizes there's a problem. I mean, you could ask someone who has no education at all on the street about the state of the world today or the state of their city. You could go hyper local or global, and they will say, yeah, there's a huge issue and things aren't fair and things are getting worse. And a lot of people are just really struggling with the cost of living. And even people who have benefited from this system, who are tremendously wealthy or well off, you also are hurt by a system where so many people feel that they're in a fragile state and they maybe are resorting to crime or they're experiencing more issues with health or mental health. I mean, we're all connected. We are all connected. And to know that there's something that through technology we've come to as through all of the advancements in computer science and physics and engineering and electrical technology, we've come to a place where we can create a form of money that is so fair, that is rules based. There are no rulers, there are rules that everyone has to follow. It's accessible to everyone around the world. It can empower 8 billion people, and we just have to kind of teach them about it. I think that that is one of the most hopeful, inspiring, incredible things today. And whether you're someone extremely poor in a developing country, just trying to, get out of your situation and better your life, or you're the wealthiest person in the world and you're trying to protect the value of what you've been able to earn in whatever industry, across that wide spectrum, both of those people need Bitcoin. And that's amazing to me. And it's accessible to both of them, maybe at different levels and amounts, but it's something that I think will be a great equalizer. It will create a lot of opportunity. It will allow a generation to catch up that feels so left behind and frustrated. And I think it will actually usher in more cooperation and peace because we're frustrated. People are frustrated, and on a micro level, when you feel so desperate or you feel so frustrated, that impacts your entire circle and the actions that you take in your everyday life. It impacts your level of hope, your motivation, what you'll do in order to try to get ahead. And so if we can just like break through those barriers of just the inability to save and the inability to get ahead and plan and just hold on to what you work so hard for, I think that that will help all of us get to a place where we can just kind of remove that layer of anxiety and help us maybe become more innovative, more creative, more able to take risks, start a company, create a product. I mean, I just think that the best of humanity is yet to come because we've never had perfect money until Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a very optimistic view. I mean, you look at the pre-COVID Fed, they were trying to keep inflation above 2% because they obfuscated inflation with growth. So they thought if we had more inflation, ergo, that means we have more growth. But that may not necessarily be the case. Now they've got way more inflation than they asked for. They're constantly adjusting the CPI through hedonics and substitutions and all this other stuff that they do. So, I mean, look, the Cantillon effect is very real, which you talked about. The people closest to the money supply benefit the most. It's asset owners, et cetera, stock owners, and the rest of the population doesn't really know who to really point the finger at. They just they get a feeling that there's something wrong, but they can't intellectualize it. They can't crystallize it into words. So now it's like every day you have like this new person on TikTok or on X or whatever with a camera phone in their car talking about how they can't afford French fries at McDonald's or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is something has to give, and I actually started doing this with the last episode. So moving forward, I'm going to ask each of my guests to ask a question to my next guest coming up. So I'm going to give you time to think about that. But while you do, I have a question from my previous guest in the previous episode.
Okay.
That it'd be interesting to get your take on. So he wants to know, this is Trader Ferg, by the way. I don't know if you know who Trader Ferg is, but Trader Ferg. If you haven't seen that episode, go ahead and catch it, guys. It's the one before this one.
What would like the perfect exit look like in one of their favorite investments?
Well, so my answer will probably disappoint a lot of people. My favorite investment is Bitcoin, and I don't trade it. I purchased Bitcoin with the intent to hold it forever. Hopefully, maybe in the future, borrow against it if I need liquidity. Yeah, I don't trade, and I don't trade because I think that you can go to a casino and do really, really well. And you get that adrenaline rush and you get a little too confident and over your skis, and all of a sudden you lose everything. And for me, I don't come from a background of wealth and status. I've really worked hard for everything I've earned, and I want to keep it. So I'm extremely conservative. I'm extremely averse to taking big gambles. I don't want to trade in and out of things. I just want something really simple, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of people are looking for something simple where you can't, it should be in theory cash, right? Like you earn it, you just put it in the bank, maybe earn some interest on it, but you can't, because the rate at which they're inflating it is just going to eat into your cash very, very quickly. So you have to put it to work, or you have to, invest it in these scarce assets we've been talking about. And really the best one I see is Bitcoin.
Cool. Well, what's a question you want to ask my next guest?
The question will be, what asset would you buy today that you plan to hold for 100 years?
Interesting. All right. There it is. Well, any concluding thoughts before you wrap things up, Natalie?
No, just thank you for doing this. If anyone has questions, I'm really passionate about helping the mainstream audience and general audience really understand Bitcoin as well as the financial system. This is a huge, huge opportunity, but it's also a massive shift. I think it's difficult you have to unlearn a lot in order to really understand Bitcoin, and I like helping people through that process. It's been the most rewarding, inspiring, and also challenging journey that I've ever been on, and I'm excited for more and more people to adopt Bitcoin, even in just a small way to start. I think that the future is very bright and orange.
Bright and orange. Okay, so drop us your socials. Where can people find you, Natalie?
So I'm on Twitter at Nat Brunell. My YouTube page, you can type in Natalie Brunell or Coin Stories. I have a newsletter, nataliebrunell.substack.com. It's free weekly, like 10 minutes or less of your economic and Bitcoin headlines. And my show is called Coin Stories. It's available on all platforms.
Cool. Link to those is down below, guys. And if you enjoyed this episode, give us a like. Also, if you really enjoyed this interview, write "Go Natalie Go" in the comments section. Go Natalie Go. And be sure to subscribe to the channel. 87% of you guys who watch this channel are still not subscribed. So hit that subscribe button. Let's flip that ratio around. And with that said, I will see you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.